Welcome to the Center of Addiction and Faith and to our monthly webinar. So grateful you are here for the topic of gratitude. There are more than 300 of you from across the country who have registered, and we're excited about it. Please take a moment to click on the chat button down below, tell us your name and where you're from today. Our topic today is addiction and the science of gratitude. It's important in this season of thankfulness that we learn to be grateful. Gratitude does not always happen naturally, and for those in recovery, it's an essential practice that we can learn and develop. Dr. Amy Krentzman from the University of Minnesota is here today with us to teach us all about it. I'm so grateful to have her as our special guest today. Today is also National Giving Day, and later in the webinar, you'll be invited to help support the work we're doing here at the Center of Addiction and Faith. We do need your support. Today, we hope that you will commit to giving what you can to help us do the work of fighting addiction and supporting recovery. There's a problem out there affecting each and every one of us. Young people are dying needlessly. I hope you will do what you can to support our efforts. My name is Pastor Ed Treat. I am the founder and CEO of the Center of Addiction and Faith. We at the Center believe that faith communities can and should play a key role in solving the addiction crisis that we're all in. But we have a lot of learning to do and to grow. So thank you for being here and being part of the solution to this terrible problem. If you have questions today during the presentation, please write them in the Q&A button down below. And later in the hour, we'll address as many of them as we can. Following our 1-hour webinar today, there will be a 30-minute discussion on the topic. It'll be a separate Zoom meeting. We haven't figured out how to do the Zoom and the webinar together. It's possible yet. So you'll have to keep a link that I'll put in the page. Capture that because once it goes away, you can't get it. I mean, once we end the Zoom, you won't be able to get that link. So make sure you capture it and copy it. Be ready to join the other meeting. Please note the discussion. I already just said that. Okay, here's the link. I'm going to post that now in your chat page. Copy, chat. All right. There it is before I forget it. Before we begin, I invite you to join me for a moment of silence to think about those who are suffering right now from addiction. We'll follow that moment of silence with the Serenity Prayer. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, courage to change the things we can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, one moment at a time, accepting hardship, pathway to peace, taking, as you do, this sinful world as it is, not as we would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if we surrender to your will, that we may be reasonably happy in this life and so happy with you forever in the next. Amen. Our moderator today is author of the amazing book, Addiction Nation, and grandmother. Timothy Mcmahon was the speaker at our last Addiction and Faith conference. He's CEO of Vagabond Consulting and Center of Addiction and Faith board member. Tim, thanks for leading us today. Good to see you.
Thanks, Ed, and thanks so much for having me be a part of this series. And a very special thanks to Dr. Amy Krentzman. She's at the University of Minnesota and specializes in research and teaching around the exact intersections that the Center of Addiction and Faith works at. And this is one thing that is so encouraging is if you're on this call, you probably have experienced at some point in our society that dichotomy between understandings of who we are as people of faith, who we are as spiritual persons, and scientific understanding and scientific research. And far too often, those two things end up at loggerheads. They end up in opposition. But if you've been following some of these webinar series for a while, we did have one other great researcher, Dr. William Miller, the co-founder of motivational interviewing, who really laid out for us how important it was to understand that some of these things, some of these values, some of these ways of being in the world that have been typically understood as part of the purview of faith and spirituality, and not the realm of science, not the realm of Western medicine, are increasingly linked. And that these simplistic ways we've tried to divide ourselves up don't actually work. And Dr. Amy Krentzman is one of those researchers who's at that cutting edge of helping us reintegrate these two different ways of knowing, these different ways of being, and seeing how they can build off of each other. And that the world of religion, the world of spirituality, is not so disconnected from the world of science and medical research as we sometimes might think. And so just like Dr. Miller told us about a fantastic study that was done comparing lots of different evidence-based approaches to treating substance use disorders, only to find that one of the driving factors was not which evidence-based approach, but the empathy of the counselor, the empathy of the staff that were working with people with substance use disorders. She's going to dive into, for us for a few minutes, some of the theory behind why gratitude matters, why gratitude should not be put aside as kind of a nice, maybe icing on the cake, but as a foundational aspect of how we understand who we are and how we understand what helps people recover and stay in recovery. And that as we pull these threads together, one of the things that I love about her work, and I hope you all will be blessed by as I have already been, is to look at it and say, wow, these are things that matter not just for people who have some more obvious struggles that pop up in society, like a substance use disorder, but these are things that we need to understand for how any of us is going to live a rich and full and complete life. And so that by applying this to some of what we see in society today as a huge problem, hopefully all of us will be enriched, whether our background or our struggle has been with substances or not, or very different aspects of the common human condition that we all share. And so we're going to take this time, and again, I'll hand it over to Dr. Krentzman for a presentation, and then we will have time to answer some questions. So if you have a question that comes along, please do go ahead and put that in the Q&A box at the bottom. We try to keep track of the chat as well, but there's so many comments there, sometimes it's harder to see. So if you've got a specific question, please be sure to use the Q&A box at the bottom. So with that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Krentzman. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Tim. That truly was an extremely warm introduction. I much appreciate it. And thanks to Pastor Ed for the invitation to come and talk to you today about the ways in which gratitude supports addiction recovery. So let's go ahead and get started. I wanted to make a slide that kind of introduced you to myself briefly. And this is the campus where I teach. I'm an associate professor of social work at the University of Minnesota, the St. Paul campus. And the St. Paul campus was formerly our purely agricultural campus, and it still is, but we have other disciplines on the campus now. And I am teaching an 8 a.m. class on Saturday. And early September, when classes were first starting, this was my walk to work. And that's what 7 a.m. looked like. And then, oops, let me go back. Previous slide. That image on the right is what 7 a.m. looked like in late October, right before the time change. So this is what it looks like where I work. But I just wanted to say really some things that Tim already said. You know, the focus of my research is addiction recovery. So therefore, I have studied things like spirituality, forgiveness, sober living houses, 12-step programs, recovery in small towns and rural communities, most recently work on journaling to support addiction recovery. And of course, a core aspect of my research agenda has been gratitude and the ways in which it supports addiction recovery. So that's just a little bit more about me and my work. Let's talk about how we'll spend our time together this morning. Our agenda is, we'll talk about very briefly, what is gratitude? And what is a gratitude practice? What do we mean by that? And then the core of our talk today will be, how does gratitude support addiction recovery? And then finally, what gratitude practices do I recommend based on my research on gratitude and addiction recovery? So this is what we'll cover together today in about a 25-minute span of time. What is gratitude? Gratitude primarily is known as being a positive emotion. It's a positive, good feeling that occurs when a person feels thankfulness, appreciation, or recognition of something positive. So gratitude very often correlates or co-varies with a whole host of positive human qualities and attributes, and negatively correlates with negative qualities and attributes. Throughout this discussion, I'll be talking about a gratitude practice. What will a gratitude practice do for us? What will a gratitude practice do for a person in recovery? So let's be sure to define, let me be sure to define what I mean by a gratitude practice. So some have said that a gratitude practice is systematically paying attention to what is going right. And so what I mean by a gratitude practice is an effortful, intentional behavior that someone would enact on some kind of regular basis that's designed to cultivate and increase feelings of gratitude. And if anyone has ever said to you, oh, I think it would be helpful if you wrote a gratitude list, and you grabbed a pen and a pad and you made a list of everything you're grateful for, that's what I would call a gratitude practice. And there are several other types of gratitude practices that I'll get to at the end of our talk today. But during the talk, when I say a gratitude practice, that's what I mean. I mean, it's some kind of intentional behavior that's a regular practice designed to recognize what we're grateful for. So the heart of our talk today, how does gratitude support addiction recovery? We will answer this question by discussing 6 psychological ideas that explain how gratitude supports addiction recovery. Some of these are psychological theories, some of them are psychological ideas. All of these are ideas that I've come upon in the course of my research on gratitude, by way mostly of reading the research literature that already exists on gratitude. The first theory I want to talk to you about is theories related to addiction and the brain. So as you may know, addiction causes changes in the brain, and these changes persist into early recovery. And these changes can make it harder for the person to experience positive emotion. This is a condition called anhedonia, a difficulty or an inability to feel positive emotion in response to everyday ordinary pleasures. So the person early in recovery has a hard time feeling any positive emotion. And these changes in the brain make it easier for that same person to feel stress. That person is more likely to be stress reactive. They're more likely to feel highly stressful at maybe things that are over time into recovery are more just small bumps in the road, no big deal, but they might have a real flashpoint of stress early on in recovery. Now we know that one of the strongest predictors of relapse is negative emotion. And we see that in early recovery, the brain is wired at first to experience less positive emotion and more negative emotion. So in some ways, the brain is priming a person for relapse just by way of its response to a career of addiction. Now, I want to reassure everyone, especially people in early recovery, that these changes to the brain improve over time with abstinence, it's been found. So how can a gratitude practice in early recovery address or help this issue with the brain in early recovery? Well, gratitude can help the brain to produce good feelings in response to everyday pleasures. So gratitude can be used as a way for the brain to retrain itself to feel positive emotion again. A friend of mine, Kevin McCauley, you might have seen some of his videos and films, he calls this hedonic rehabilitation. He feels that people in early recovery, they need hedonic, meaning pleasure-seeking, rehabilitation. In other words, they need to relearn how to feel pleasure at everyday experiences like a cat purring on your lap or the warm sun on your skin, to retrain the brain to feel and experience those things as pleasurable again. And a gratitude practice can do that, because a gratitude practice basically has us revisit and savor things that have gone well and are going well. Moving on to the next psychological theory. This is the theory of the negativity bias. And this theory, like many others I'll discuss today, affect everyone, whether the person has had an addiction or not. So the negativity bias says that negative thoughts, emotions, and experiences have a greater impact on us than neutral or positive experiences. This means that when something bad happens, we're going to remember it more, we're going to ruminate over it longer, it's going to be stickier in our minds and in our hearts than positive or neutral experiences. The negativity bias, they say, serves an evolutionary purpose. So it had a survival purpose at one time, and maybe still does to some degree. In other words, if there's a threat to life or limb, something really negative in my environment, it helps me survive if I pay a lot of attention to it. But still, what that does is it cultivates a preponderance of negativity in the mind. I don't know if you're familiar with John Gottman's research on romantic relationships, but there's a finding in John Gottman's research that I feel really speaks to the negativity bias. And that is, he has found that for every one negative event, happy couples experience 20 positive events. To me, that's a huge landslide. You know, one negative event has to be, if you will, washed out by 20 positive events. And what Gottman is suggesting here is that if the couple has 10 positive events for every one negative event, that couple won't be happy. It's not enough positive events to wash out the negativity. And that speaks to how strong and how large a negative event can be. Furthermore, when happy couples are working to solve a conflict, so this might be a difficult patch for this couple, for every one negative event, they have 5 positive events. So even when they're discussing something difficult, there are many, many more positive events to negative events. So how can a gratitude practice help us, all of human beings, with the negativity bias that we all share? And how can a gratitude practice help people in recovery, given that they're also going to be suffering from the negativity bias? Well, gratitude can help us give at least some more weight to what is going well. So on that seesaw where the negative is always heavier than the positive, if we have a gratitude practice and we're looking at what's going well and we're savoring what's been pleasant today, it can start to tilt the seesaw a little bit more in the positive direction. And as I mentioned earlier, people in early recovery really very strongly, imperatively need to learn how to do this, or they're at risk for relapse. The next theory I will talk to you about is a theory called the hedonic treadmill. Hedonic meaning pleasure seeking. The hedonic treadmill theory says that each person has their own or their usual or their average level of mood or level of happiness. When something especially good happens, we feel much better than our average. When something especially troubling happens, we feel much worse than our own average. But we eventually return to our usual level of mood. What this theory suggests is that improvements in life provide short-term happiness. Then we become accustomed to them, and then they become the new normal, and we don't really get that same happiness from them anymore as we did when they were new. So when I give this talk, I sometimes say to people, think of something that happened to you that when it first happened, you were elated. Maybe you found that apartment or that home that you really love, or you met your significant other, or you got your dream job, or you got admitted to the college of your choice. At first, you were just over the moon elated. Maybe you brought that puppy home from wherever you got from the shelter, and you were elated. And then over time, you just stopped feeling excited about it at all. And if anything, these things became annoying. And that's the hedonic treadmill at work, is when those exciting, thrilling things just start to feel like the background. The other thing that's kind of like built into the hedonic treadmill is a little bit of the negativity bias. We get used to the good things that happen to us much faster. So we accommodate to those. We acclimate to those much faster. They become the background much faster than negative things that happen to us. And again, the hedonic treadmill applies to everyone, whether they've had an addiction or not. So how can a gratitude practice help us and others with the hedonic treadmill? Well, gratitude can reawaken the original good feelings we had when a good thing was new. So gratitude practice can hopefully make us feel a renewed sense of joy that we got that job, or we met that person, or we had that wonderful opportunity to attend that school. It can help us feel again some of that thrill that we felt in the beginning. And I'll be just kind of marching chop through these theories, but we'll have good time for questions and answers at the end. The next theory I'll talk to you about is one of my favorites. It's the theory of the maintenance of behavior change. And Alex Rothman, who works with me at the University of Minnesota, has put forth a theory that the initiation of behavior change, that is starting a change, as hard as that is, has a different psychological property than the maintenance of a behavior change that has already been made. And I argue that the maintenance of behavior change is even harder than initiating a behavior change. As hard as initiating is, and it's very hard, maintaining is even harder, because people in recovery are maintaining that behavior change a day at a time, hopefully for all the days of the rest of their lives. So that in and of itself is quite remarkable. So what about a theory of the maintenance of behavior change? Not a theory of the initiation of behavior change, but a theory of the maintenance of behavior change. This theory says that individuals who are maintaining a behavior change, whether they realize it or not, they're regularly asking themselves, is this change worth it? Is my life better now in recovery than it was in active addiction? And the answer has to be yes. Every time they ask themselves that question or they make this comparison, consciously or unconsciously, the answer has to be yes, life is better now, in order for them to continue to marshal the considerable effort it takes to put all that energy into the maintenance of behavior change. So how can a gratitude practice help someone who's maintaining a behavior change? Well, gratitude can shine light on the ways that life in recovery is better than life in active addiction, and that can provide motivation to stay sober. So whereas the maintenance of behavior change theory says we have to say, yes, life is better now, well, a gratitude practice can help find justification or rationale or evidence. Yes, life is better now. The next theory is a theory of gratitude as a relationship enhancer. So here we move into this realm of gratitude as having an interdisciplinary quality. Gratitude happens when we benefit from the positive actions of another person. So a good number of psychologists feel that it's only gratitude when we're the beneficiary of a good act of another human being. Some people debate whether that's true or not, but many people feel that way. When we're the recipient of something good from someone else, if we feel grateful for it, then that gratitude motivates us to reciprocate, either to the person who's been good to us or to pay it forward to someone else. So that has led some psychologists to believe that gratitude is essential to everyday relationships. If someone does something good for me, I feel grateful, and then I do something good for them, our relationship is arguably strengthened by that interaction. So how can a gratitude practice help with recovery? Well, gratitude can help strengthen positive relationships with others. And we know how important it is for people in recovery to have relationships with other people in recovery, as well as positive, fruitful, and rewarding relationships with every other human being in the world. So gratitude can help enhance all those relationships. The last theory I have for you is this theory or idea that gratitude is transcendent. that there's something about gratitude that just goes above and beyond. And this comes from some of the ideas written about gratitude, saying that gratitude is especially felt in response to a gift that cannot be repaid, or a gift that is in some ways unearned. So how can a gratitude practice help with recovery, given this idea that a gratitude practice can help people feel that they've received a gift that is in some ways unearned? Well, that feeling can lead to a feeling of being fortunate, of being lucky, and it can produce feelings of humility and awe. And those positive emotions can give a person a lift and have other downstream benefits. So the next two slides, I'll kind of summarize all that I've said. How does gratitude support addiction recovery? Gratitude can help the brain to get in the habit of producing good emotion. Gratitude can give greater weight to what is going well. Gratitude can reawaken the original good feelings we had when a good thing was new in our lives. Gratitude can shine light on the ways life in recovery is better than life in active addiction. Gratitude can help provide motivation to stay sober. Gratitude can help strengthen relationships with others. Gratitude can generate a feeling of being fortunate or feeling lucky. Gratitude can produce feelings of humility and awe. Now, before I move into the next phase, the final phase of my talk today, and I'm just going to quickly check the time. Okay, we're doing just fine in terms of time. A couple things I want to bring your attention to. Over this past summer, I was preparing to teach a new class, a PhD class in social work, and I was challenged by something I read. And what I read said, how are you as the researcher sharing the results of your research findings with the people you're studying? So in other words, this reading was saying researchers should share the results of their research findings with the people they're studying. And so it challenged me, and I decided to respond to the challenge by making a series of short YouTube videos that describe my research study findings and other things I've learned en route to doing my research, and sharing them in short YouTube videos that anyone could watch and could learn from. And I use a Creative Commons license, so these videos can be shared widely. So the link to my YouTube channel, I don't know if this is easy to get to or harder, but it's z.umn.edu/videos by Dr. K. And what you'll find is a 10-minute video that summarizes all that I've just said today. But I plan to make that only the first of many videos on teaching and learning and on addiction recovery research over time. I also want to quickly invite you to consider being my partner in any future research study I conduct. So just drop me an email if that sounds of interest to you. The next study I'm planning is a study related to journaling to support addiction recovery. And I would train the trainer how to use this certain kind of journaling to support addiction recovery. And then you would start your own group of people who would do the journaling. So if these ideas are of interest, just drop me an email. We will make these slides available to you, and you can always find me at the University of Minnesota School of Social Work if you don't have a chance to jot down this complicated email address. So now the final segment of my presentation. What are my recommendations for a daily gratitude practice? So I think that the main recommendation, you've heard this with exercise. You've heard this thing that's so often said and repeated. The patient says to the doctor, what's the best exercise, physical exercise for me to do? And the doctor says, whichever exercise you would be willing to do. So I think the same is absolutely true of a daily gratitude practice, that the best gratitude practice would be the one that you're willing to do, that you're able to do, that's easy for you, that's already working well for you. You hear so often now of people texting each other their gratitude lists in the morning. That just sounds terrific to me. I would have no recommendations for improving that. But over the course of my research, I've picked up some tips and observations related to what is the best kind of a daily gratitude practice for a number of reasons. What I recommend for people, and this is what I do myself, is to approach gratitude by way of two pathways to what's good in life. And the first pathway is what we're all familiar with, is writing the gratitude list. And so I call that things that I am grateful for. And I give, when I'm teaching this to someone else, I give them some hints. First of all, to consider things that you usually take for granted. Maybe your five senses, or the fact that you have food and shelter today, the fact that you live in a relative, peaceful social environment. But I also have found it helpful to give people specific examples of what I mean. So I'll say, perhaps you might consider putting on your gratitude list, grateful for sobriety, for recovery, for shelter, for health, for your job, for your food, for your relationships, for the good experiences you've had in life. I have found when I give people examples, they're able to write a longer gratitude list. Now, the second pathway to what's good in life is a second type of gratitude practice. This gratitude practice came from the psychological research on gratitude, and it's a practice they call the 3 good things exercise, where a person writes, at the end of the day, they write 3 good things that happened today and why they happened. So I changed that just slightly. I talk about that in terms of good things that happened today, in the past, roughly in the past 24 hours. So that list is a lot more immediate, it's a lot more recent, and a lot more specific. Good things that happened today. And the hint there is small things count. And again, I give all kinds of examples. You can consider the weather, any small accomplishment, anything that was even a little bit fun or enjoyable, a moment of kindness or encouragement that you received from someone else or that you gave to someone else. Maybe you completed a task, even a small task. You saw or heard something beautiful, or you had a moment in nature. And when I give people a lot of examples like this, they're able to write a very long list. So what my research participants have said when I've taught them how to do this, these bullets that you see here on the slide are actual words from my research participants. This is a composite example of people in recovery. These people were in treatment, in residential treatment for addiction recovery. And these are the sort of things that they wrote under both lists. And in a minute, I'll just give you some quiet to read this list over. And I see my time is very nearly up, Pastor Ed. I've got my eye on the clock, and I'll wind things up in the next minute or so. But I just want to say that the length of these lists also represents the average number of bullet points that the people in the research study were able to produce. So for good things that happened, they were able to produce an average of 6 items every single day. And things I am grateful for, they were able to write an average of 10 items a day. So that's pretty good, pretty long, lengthy list. So to just wrap things up, if you want to lead a gratitude group, which might be something you want to do, a few quick tips for that. I would explain these 2 pathways. I would provide the group with examples. I'd encourage people, make your lists as long as you possibly can. I tell my people, pour Miracle Grow on your gratitude list. You want it as long and robust as possible. I encourage people in my groups to get ideas from each other and then to share. Thank you so much, Pastor Ed. I got that idea to say I'm grateful for my 5 senses. I got that idea from you. I have the people read out what they have written, only what they feel comfortable sharing. And then I have people say, thank you for that idea. I got that idea from you. And that generates a lot of positive emotion. Ask your group, how are these 2 lists similar and how are they different? That spawns a lot of interesting dialogue. Ask your group, what is the benefit of making 2 different lists like that? What made me invite you to have 2 paths instead of 1 path? And I just love this question to ponder it. Ask your group, what is the difference between I'm glad it is nice out today and I'm grateful it is nice out today? Have them ponder and try to speak to this profound question. What is the difference here? In closing, I just want to express my gratitude for my community partners in research, the people who give me funding to do my studies, my research assistants, the University of Minnesota School of Social Work, my employer. I've cited a number of references in this talk, and they're all, the citation list is in this tiny URL. Again, you'll get a copy of these slides so you can access that URL. As I make new videos, I'm going to tweet them out and put them in LinkedIn, announce them on LinkedIn, so that can be a way for you to get a signal for when one of my new videos is out. And I just thank you kindly for your time and attention and your shared interest in this topic with me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Krentzman, and have already seen what I felt from some of the folks in the comments, that if anyone's keeping a gratitude list today, they are grateful for this webinar. And this is also the time I'm going to pause. We will get back to being able to do some more Q&A. I've also seen a few folks already request a copy of the presentation. Ed has already dropped it in the chat as a PDF, so if anyone wants to grab that, you can feel free to download this. But another thing that I think we are grateful for today is the Center of Addiction and Faith. And when I first started writing about and sharing my own story of addiction and recovery publicly, I assumed there was going to be a whole bunch more organizations out there doing the exact work of the Center of Addiction and Faith. And then when I stumbled across the Center of Addiction and Faith and their annual conference, I assumed it would be a very well-staffed, large group of folks who were pulling this all together. And I was shocked to find that it was the passion and the mission of a pastor, someone who's in full-time pastoral ministry and had carved out the space to do this as a passion project, supported by some additional wonderful volunteers. And if you have been blessed in any way by the work of the Center of Addiction and Faith, if you have been informed, if you have been educated, we do hope that you will express your gratitude to the organization, to the work that Ed is doing along with so many other volunteers, and support with a small financial contribution. And to kind of bring home some of the reasons why we're grateful for this organization, I'm going to ask Reverend Gail Monsma, who is ordained in the Presbyterian Church and a pastor in Michigan, share a few reasons why she has been grateful that she has found this organization.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say it's connectivity. I felt I am an interim pastor at a congregation following a pastor who was pretty far in his alcoholism. And when I stumbled and wondering what to do, how to deal with things, and I come from a background, I've been active in Al-Anon for a large portion of my adult life. But I was wondering, how do you deal with this with a whole community of faith, and how do I share and bring it up in faith? And I stumbled along on a Facebook page, someone saying, have you heard of this organization? Gave Ed a call. He was willing to help, connected into some 12-step programs. And as a pastor and person of faith, it was wonderful to connect with others. And then I attended the conference. And that was wonderful to be exposed to not only things and triggers in my own life I was coming upon of working here, but also looking at how to help a whole congregation move forward. So there's been a myriad of things that have particularly helped me. Probably most of all, I'm not alone. And this organization, if you've been on this webinar, does wonderful research and brings in wonderful places that apply to my professional life and my everyday life. So encourage you to stay involved, encourage you to give a donation, as the center is in a pivotal point of moving forward and reaching out to more and more people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gail. And Dr. Krentzman will be excited to have you back. Thank you again for that presentation. And I know for me, it just kind of hits home once again that these are great findings and so important for addiction and recovery, but also just for how we all live our lives and live fulfilled lives. And in my own story, I look back and I often define it not so much as what I did, but what was done for me. And so I was wondering if you could start off by kind of opening up the aperture for us a little bit. We've talked about what people can do internally to cultivate their own sense of gratitude. But have you looked at, or do you have a sense of how you could share with us if we are thinking about, all right, how do we give those good gifts to someone who is in recovery, especially in early stages of recovery? What could those gifts look like in a way that helps that person have more to grab onto? And I love how you talked about it, that especially it's that free gift. And if you're coming from the Christian tradition, you recognize those words so much. A free gift that cannot be repaid is at the core of what a lot of folks engage with and has been transformative for them. I was hoping you could speak more to that.
So just so I'm clear, Tim, the idea is there's someone in our lives who's new to recovery. And what can we do for them that's optimal for them to help them feel better about recovery? Is that right, Tim?
Yes.
Well, I noticed in the chat, and as Gail was speaking, some thumbs up for Al-Anon. I believe that the family and loved ones of the person with the addiction might suffer even more than the person who actually has the addiction. I think the families suffer tremendously from this very confusing, very bewildering illness. And I also recommend Al-Anon for families and friends to meet others in the same boat, reduce some of that shame and stigma, and learn how to optimally help and be supportive of their loved ones, because often it is the opposite of what a person instinctually wants to do, or a person instinctually thinks would be helpful. So I don't know if my answer overlaps very much with gratitude, although I know that in Al-Anon, gratitude is a central component, as it is with most 12-step programs. But that's my go-to, Tim, when I think in answer to your question. I don't know if those on the chat have additional thoughts.
Thank you. And there is in the Q&A box a good question to kind of follow up on that theme. So this is from Gloria England. She asked, I'm very interested in how the information about how gratitude in couples, how this can apply to family recovery. It would be a great thing to share this information in our MRC family recovery group for the couples there. I think it would be a great motivator for them to have a gratitude practice. So taking that work around couples, how would that apply in creating a healthy family systems and dynamics?
It's a great thought. And Gloria, if a shout out to you, I believe you've been a guest speaker in my addiction class in the past. So hello and greetings to you, Gloria. Well, I know that families sit around the dinner table and they do exercises like rose, thorn, bud, and everyone goes around the table, family members of all ages. What was something good that happened today? What was something bad that happened today? And what's something hopeful you feel for tomorrow? So something even that simple can be a way for family members to share what's going right for them. That's just one thing that comes to mind. I know that even quite young children are able to name what are some good things that happened today. You know, they might say, oh, we had pizza, but they don't have to think very long. They can come up with it right away. They're really readily able to access answers to these questions or ability to participate in these gratitude exercises, in my observation.
Thank you. We've got another question here from Henry Sear. This is a distinction I'm not fully aware of, so maybe you can parse this out for us. Asks about maintenance of behavior change and managing of behavior change. Is one better, and can we maintain behavior or manage behavior?
That's a really good question. I mean, I've never given this specific question much thought, but even as the question is articulated, managing a behavior change, it just sounds very heavy and very burdensome, like a heavy weight. And maintaining a behavior change sounds a little more effervescent, a little lighter. I think if my observations resonate with the person who asked the question, maybe what it really speaks to is this idea that can the maintenance of behavior change, or even if we must say it this way, the management of behavior change, can it be joyful? Does it have to be such a slog or such a grueling, difficult burden, that heavy burden that we carry day after day? Because if it is so difficult and it is so hard, it is such a heavy burden, are we going to be able to really carry it all the days of the rest of our lives? That that the maintenance of behavior change, can there be joy in recovery? Can there be joy in every single day of recovery? Happiness, you know, it's a therapeutic recommendation that a person in recovery experience some happiness and some pleasure every single day. They're learning how to re-experience pleasure in response to everyday ordinary activities. And for them to plan something joyful, to spend time with a hobby, or to do something they know is fun, go out dancing, go out singing, you know, when it's not COVID times, do things that, go fishing, do things, cooking, things that bring them pleasure. That's part of their treatment. That's part of their medicine, actually. Happiness is really part of their medicine, because the happier they are in recovery, the more likely they will be to stick in recovery. That's how I see it.
So, love how you put that, because so much of recovery, it's thought about what you say no to. And really, I think what you're drawing us to is how powerful what we say yes to is, and what we are able to fill our lives with. That was where I was wondering if you could speak to, I think, a related concept to gratitude, and that's the experience of awe. Have you seen some connections in your work between the cultivation of internal gratitude and the experience of awe?
Well, let me say it this way. The reason I included that idea of awe in the PowerPoint is the idea that so often in life, human beings are involved in striving and getting ahead. And if I work hard, I'm going to get a result. And that's kind of how I think we might be more or less fundamentally programmed as human beings. Like, if I work hard, if I do the right thing, I'll get some kind of gain or positive reward. But the idea of some aspects of gratitude is the idea, this is a gift that I didn't deserve, that I didn't earn. It goes against that sort of ego-driven productivity, hard work will pay off mindset completely. It kind of is altogether different and away from that mindset. It's this whole other realm where I did nothing to earn this, and yet this blessing fell into my lap. To me, that I associate that with the idea of humility, because it goes against this ego-driven kind of an idea of how to succeed in life. And it connects it to me with a sense of awe. So that's kind of my thinking around the idea of awe and why I put that in the slide.
So some of what you're touching on is really getting, it's not just this is what folks who are struggling with a substance use disorder need. This is a pretty big critique of a lot that drives our society. And talking about some forces that are pretty predominant in how we are trained to think about our lives. And so, as we've seen in the US, we don't just have these recent numbers of 100,000 dead in the last 12 months from an overdose, but we've seen a doubling. I think it's been since the 1970s, a doubling of overdose deaths roughly every 7 to 9 years. And so would you define some of what we're seeing, not just as a crisis of those who struggle with substances, but a larger cultural crisis of meaning, purpose, significant, and what's important?
I was just listening to an audiobook on this topic of more, you know, and it was a book about climate change, actually. If I can think of the author, Hope Jared was the author. And the idea is, I think, you know, as I think of these things, some of these are my own personal thoughts and ideas rather than ideas grounded in research, but I feel that we're programmed as individuals, the way we're programmed for the negativity bias in order to survive, we're kind of programmed as human beings to be striving, to always be seeking more, to kind of not all the time be satisfied with what we have, but always want something that we don't have. I think that's part of our programming as human beings. And, you know, it is something like the negativity bias that we can, I think it cuts both ways. It both helps us survive. It helps us establish that there's plenty for us and that there's plenty of resources, plenty of food, plenty of energy for us, but it also cuts against us in certain ways. In that we might be less likely to share or to take care of others with this mentality. And how can we ultimately feel that much peace if we're always feeling like there's something missing? There's something that I still need to do. I'm not done yet. I still need more. There's still more I need to be doing.
Right. It almost feels as though it's based in fear, the negativity, things that we see out in the world and we seem to focus on so strongly, and feels like we've been raised in a culture of that. If you watch the media or do social media, I mean, it's almost a litany of everything that's wrong, and you feel like all the wheels are coming off all the time, and it seems to be our natural inclination to be drawn to that. And so it does take some extra effort to get out of that and see the positive. I was thinking as I walked in here today, to do this webinar across the street, they've got this big old truck with a grinder on it, and a big team of leaf blowers, people with leaf blowers came out. I'm going, oh great, I got to do a webinar, and I'm like, I'm my autumn, instead of saying it's a beautiful blue sky, it's sunny, and oh good, they're cleaning up their leaves, I immediately took it personal. It's like I automatically go there. I really have to work against that all the time because I'm just good at finding what's wrong. And I have to work at finding what's right.
There was another question in the chat, and then we might be handing it back to you at that point. Specifically about, are there practices you would recommend with kind of a trauma-informed mindset or trauma-sensitive mindset? So does this look different if you're working with people with PTSD?
This is an excellent question, and it's one of the things I'm dedicating myself to learn more about, because of course trauma co-occurs with addiction. It's both has a causal role, and also addiction causes trauma. So the intersection of trauma and addiction is huge, but I admit it's an area I'm only just now starting to learn about. So I don't know how gratitude practices might be different, or gratitude recommendations might be different for people with trauma. I would turn to a trauma expert with that question.
And I would say, I grew up in a pretty traumatic environment, and I think it predisposed me to be less capable of experiencing gratitude than average. And so for me, because of my traumatic upbringing, I was predisposed to addiction, but I'm also predisposed to fear and negativity and seeing what's wrong. I'm living in fear, and so I have that affliction that continues to follow me, and so I have to be really conscious, and just like with any discipline, to be healthy, I have to exercise and eat right. I have to discipline those things because my natural inclination is to be lazy and eat crap, and you know what I mean. So I have to work at it. And same with gratitude. If I don't think about. I remember when I first got in recovery, for the first couple of years of 12-step meetings, the topic of gratitude comes up way too often. I mean that kiddingly, but I just remember for the first couple of years, every time they would say the topic is gratitude, I would think, oh crap, I want to tell you what's wrong. I want to tell you what complaints are, what hurts, and what's not going right. And so my brain would go, oh, okay, I'm supposed to be grateful. What am I grateful for? And I would come up with a list of, I've got a home, I've got a job, but it didn't feel gratitude. It felt like I should for those things, but I didn't feel it. And it was a couple of years in, and I love what you talked about with the brain studies, because I really do think there's legitimacy to that I didn't have the capability. I had to develop it, feel gratitude. And it was a couple of years in that the topic came up, and I realized I felt gratitude. I didn't just list the things to be grateful, I should be grateful for. I would list those things, and my immediate thought was, well, so what? Everybody has these things. And some people have a lot more, and I could always like it anyway. So it was amazing breakthrough when I finally realized, after practicing gratitude, it actually came.
I think it's back to you, Ed.
Oh, it is. Is it maybe time for me now? There have been a few requests to say we did post the PDF of your presentation. Some were asking if it's possible actual PowerPoint slides so that they could present this. So if you're willing to share those, if you're not, I understand. And if you are, then I will get those out to folks who are here today. And this whole presentation is being copied. We will edit it and make it available on our app. I want to thank you, Tim, for hosting today, and especially you, Amy. I'm grateful for your willingness to be here, and I'm grateful for the work you're doing. And I was promising before the webinar began that Amy's work is tremendous, and she has a lot of topics we can exploit going forward. I hope to find a specialist for you at the Center of Addiction and Faith, and that we can continue to work together, because I think we're trying to do the same things. So thank you for your work, and thanks for being here today, and I'm grateful for you.
Likewise.
Yeah, thanks. So thanks for our hosts and our guests here today, and thanks for Gail for sharing her gratitude, and thanks to all of you for being here. I'm grateful for you. It's kind of funny that you do a topic and after you're done, you feel grateful. A reminder that there is a discussion after this. We can have a little gratitude fest on a Zoom meeting following this meeting, talk to Dr. Krentzman some more about her work, and maybe share some of our own personal experiences in recovery on the topic of gratitude. Our next conference is coming up October 13th, 14th, and 15th in Wilmington, Minnesota. We're working on some really great speakers and breakouts for that. So please mark that in your calendar, plan to come and experience what it's like to be together in those mountaintop things. We have some 12 things that we provide online, and they tend to be attended by churchgoers who speak the language of their faith, also of recovery, and it's a very enriching experience. There's a Sunday night meeting for a lot of Lutherans attend. There's a Wednesday night meeting a lot of Episcopalians attend. And there's a Thursday private meeting for clergy. And we screen folks to make sure they're clergy, but it's a special meeting for clergy because clergy deals are unique. And so it's sort of a professional affiliation. And that's every Thursday at noon. So I hope if you're clergy, you'll be welcome to come to that. If you're a seminarian or any key church leader would be welcome at that, because you get to deal with special things in the church and in faith communities that make for challenges, I think. These webinars all on our website, but especially on our app. They're easily accessible on our app. So I really invite you to download our free app. Everybody who sees our app is amazed at what a great resource it is. On there are podcasts, stories about clergy and recovery. There are worship helps, a long list of other resources. There's a tool there for helping you find addiction and mental health providers in your area and drill down to very specific, if it's an eating disorder, if it's depression, if it's bulimia, you can find the exact kind, it'll lead you there. So that's all for free on our app. So go to your app store, look for Center of Addiction and Faith, and enjoy that free gift. There's a lot more we want to offer in the coming days. I have more ideas than I know what to do with. My bandwidth is only limited by the resources that we're able to get. So as we emerge from this COVID pandemic, mental health addiction issues are worse than ever. As you well know, it's an enormous health crisis, and I'm calling out for all faith communities to get engaged with it. There's so much you can be doing. You are on the front lines. You could be helping people. Is that faith communities have sort of avoided addiction and mental health stuff, but if they were to get in it, they do incredible, great work. They bring a lot of healing and hope. So in order to continue to do your help, as Tim and Gil made the appeal to you, there is a link in your chat page. I'm going to put it there once again. And this is Giving Tuesday. And so you can through the Giving Tuesday, the National Giving Day website. And that is going in the chat page as I speak right now. There it is. Okay, that's all I have to say. Did you all get the link for the following meeting? I want to make sure that I'm going to post that again real quick before we close. Here it is. I know we lose some people, so if you want to be in that meeting, you got to grab this now, because once we close this meeting, this link will disappear. So if you're coming to the meeting, there it is. I just posted it in the chat. Copy and paste that into your browser as soon as we sign off here. Gonna do now. Thank you all. Go in peace. Serve the Lord.